Okay, here we go. This is John with the latest on the NFL AFC playoff race going into week 15. Beginning with two of the big winners from week 14's action, the Browns unleashed Joe Flacco to go to 8-5 and stay above the 7-6 crowd and now have a good conference record for tiebreaker purposes. The Broncos were in danger of falling off the horse, but got a big win to go to 7-6 and stay in the rodeo while improving their conference record, which is one of their weak points for tiebreaker needs. That brings us to a couple of the week's losers. Both the Colts and Texans had an opportunity to join the Browns at 8-5 and stay above the fray, and they both failed miserably in games that hurt their not stellar conference records, which is looking like it could easily come into play at the end of the season. Here are the win numbers from the computer. First, the minimum number of wins needed for any mathematical chance. And the Ravens, Dolphins, Chiefs, Jaguars, and new addition to the list, the Browns could, in theory, all lose out and still make the playoffs. Everybody else needs to get to at least 8 wins to have any chance. Next number, how many wins will assure a team of a playoff spot? And it looks like the Chiefs and Jaguars, if they get to 11, they will be in no matter what, while the Ravens, Browns, and Dolphins have to get to 12 to avoid the wackiest of scenarios that would otherwise leave them out. Really, the most interesting thing of these figures is how few teams control their own destiny. The Steelers, Colts, and Texans all lost that power, at least for the time being, with their losses, and thus most of the conference could in theory win out and still have scenarios that leave them hanging. Mind-boggling that only 5 teams control their own destiny. Looks like it really could come down to a bunch of complicated scenarios depending on which teams are tied at the end to figure out which ones advance. But all this is just for the far out scenarios. The important number, as always, is what is the win number needed to have a realistic chance at the playoffs, aka wild card, and that number sits between 9 and 10 wins. 10 wins should, quote unquote, should be safe, with 9 wins having decent odds of at least ending up in a tie for the last spot. As always, I'll be sharing TeamRankings.com projections, and spoiler alert, they do have an overflow of teams at 9 and 8 in their estimates, so things look like they will be interesting, and as always, thanks to them. Going through the teams, starting with the AFC East, Dolphins lead back to 2 games, still overwhelming favorites to win the division with only the Bills chasing them. Computer guesses 10 or 11 wins will be what is needed to take it. Team Rankings has the Dolphins getting 11, with the Bills finishing 9 and 8 in their projections to be one of many tied for a wild card spot. Dolphins fell to the Titans because of course they did, to make things interesting. Now 9 and 4, have the lead for the division, but also have a tough remaining schedule. I have removed them from my realistically in list and put the contention label back on them. Still a 95% chance to make it to postseason. Have the YOLO Zach Wilson and the Jets experience this week. I don't think they want to go into Cowboys, Ravens, Bills finish at 9 and 5. Bills division hopes reappeared with their big win over the Chiefs, combined with that Dolphins loss. They do have a non-good conference record and a couple key losses to other contenders to worry about. In contention with a 31% chance to make the playoffs. Host the Cowboys this week. Do have a couple more relaxing games upcoming in case they are 7-7 in a few days' time. Jets at 5 and 8 with their destruction of the Texans being a too little too late thing. I have them in my realistically out column. Patriots are, of course, eliminated. In the AFC North, Ravens maintain their two-game lead with it just being the Browns that have much of a chance to catch them, although all four teams are mathematically still in the division race. Projected number of wins needed to claim it is 11 or 12. Team rankings projects the Ravens to hold on to that two-game lead with the Browns finishing at 10-7 for a wildcard spot and both the Bengals and Steelers ending up at 9-8 to join the tiebreaker party. Ravens needed an overtime miracle, but got it to beat the Rams. Now 10-3, and the only team that I now have as being realistically in. 83% chance to win the division and near 100 for postseason. Probably don't need another win to be in the playoffs, but it would be good insurance. Do have some tough games to finish, beginning with the Jaguars. Browns with the big win against the Jaguars puts them at 8-5 and primes them for a playoff berth with a very winnable remaining schedule. Do have a couple head-to-head wins over some other contenders, Colts and Jaguars, with a loss to the Broncos that could come into play if they don't stay above the crowd. Clearly and solidly in contention with a 78% chance to get it done. Get the Bears this week and then what could be a big playoff decider against the Texans. The Steelers' kryptonite appears to be 2-10 teams. At 7-6, they are now in the middle of the pack. Still have the best division record in the North. They had a winnable remaining schedule, but that clearly didn't matter. It now toughens up as their last four are against playoff hopefuls. In contention, although odds are now just below 50-50. Play the Colts this week. Winner goes to 8-6 and in good shape. Loser, not so much. Bengals got their second win in a row against those Colts to keep their hopes alive. Now 7-6, but playoff odds just 33%, as while they have some individual head-to-head wins against the Bills, Jaguars, and now Colts, that division record and conference record is still likely to be an issue come playoff spot handing out time. Host the Vikings this week before some crucial matches in the AFC. Over at the AFC South, beginning to think it was the NFC South with none of the contenders wanting to win this week. Jaguars maintained their one-game lead over the Colts and Texans and are still the big favorites. Computer estimate is that 9 or 10 wins will be good enough to win it. Team rankings has it being 10 with the Jaguars hanging on, and the Colts and Texans joining the 9-8 party. Jaguars with that loss to the Browns keeps their division coronation on ice. Still hold the tiebreaker over the Colts and likely would win one over the Texans. Have a couple wins that could be useful if they were to fall into the wildcard race. Solidly in contention with an 87% chance to dance with 3 out of 4 odds to win the division. Tough game against the Ravens this week, but then a couple against NFC South teams that should be winnable. Colts 4-game win streak came to an end against the Bengals. Don't have the toughest remaining schedule. Steelers this week is another winner in good shape, loser is not situation. Do have some potentially crucial losses against the Jaguars and the Browns and Bengals in particular. 44% chance to make the playoffs. Texans came out of New Jersey a little worse for wear. 7-6 with some big wins over the Steelers, Bengals, and Broncos for tiebreaker purposes, but not a strong conference record for multi-team tie calculations. In contention, the Jets game was supposed to launch them into feel-good territory. We'll have to rely on a win against the Titans this week before the Browns next week. Titans with that Monday night win over the Dolphins got to 5-8, but that is just not a good place to be, so still realistically out. Out west, the Kansas City Crybabies, Chiefs, declined their usual invitation to walk away with the AFC West title. Still have a lead over the Broncos and a favorable tiebreak position as well. All four teams are technically still in the race, but it's really just between the Chiefs and Broncos. Computer says just 9 or 10 wins will be good enough. Team rankings has the Chiefs holding on with 11 and the Broncos finishing 9-8 along with just about everyone else. Chiefs with their second straight loss puts them in the unusual position of needing some late season wins. Still leading the division with a good conference record and not the toughest finishing schedule. Beginning with the Patriots this week, so of course in contention with an 87% chance to make the playoffs and 3 out of 4 to win the West. Broncos unplug the Chargers to get back over 500. Do have wins over the Bills and Browns if needed later. Don't have a good conference record and a loss to the Texans that might hurt later. In contention with a 39% chance to make the playoffs. Still a halfway decent chance to win the division. Play the Lions this week and then get to finish with Patriots, Chargers again, and Raiders, all very winnable. Chargers now 5-8, and that is realistically out. Raiders now 5-8, and that is ditto. These two play each other. Loser about as close to actually eliminated as they come. To sum up my analysis, back down to just the Ravens in my realistically in column, as they should be able to find an 11th win, which is a very safe number. With the Patriots being officially kicked into the harbor waters, I have 4 teams in the realistically out column that would need to win out to have any realistic hope. Chargers, Titans, Raiders, and Jets. Obviously, if any of them makes progress towards that feat, I will revisit them. But for now, that leaves 10 teams fighting for 6 leftover spots. Over to Week 15 scenarios. And to be honest, the complexity of the AFC for this week nearly made the computer jump out the window. Do not take any of these for absolute gospel, but if they are not completely accurate, they should be realistically accurate. The Ravens can clinch a playoff spot with a win and a couple two-way combos involving the Steelers, Broncos, Browns, or Texans, with there being some more complex ways they could get in as well. The Jets appear to be eliminated with a loss and either a Bills win, some combos involving the Bengals, Browns, Broncos, and Texans, with some more complex ways to say goodbye as well. For the Titans, I have them as being eliminated with a loss and wins by either the Bengals, Colts, Dolphins, or Bills, with again there being a couple more complicated possibilities. The computer should have a much better handle on this next week when there are less remaining games to sift through and possibly a little more clarity in the standings.